Hey, what's going on, Econ Kids? A through K group. We're back for just to kind of to finish up the notes that we didn't quite get to at the end of class yesterday. You're going to need to know this information for the worksheets that you have coming up. You won't really understand all the questions in the worksheet unless you kind of understand this little section. So what we're going to be looking at here in just a few slides of notes, and we have a couple practice questions, is we're going to look at what are called terms of trade. Now, when it comes to trade, we should know from yesterday that number one, trade is important for countries because it allows us to consume or to be able to get goods outside of our production possibilities curve. So we can get more than what we could produce just on our own by specializing and trading. And in addition to this, we also were introduced to the ideas of absolute and comparative advantage. Absolute means you can just do more or more efficiently than somebody else, and comparative advantage means that it has lower opportunity cost for you than somebody else. Basically, it's worth your time to do something if you have the lower opportunity cost. Now, we know then that we should trade, but then the question is, how should we trade? What should that trade look like? And so we're going to look at what what those terms of trade actually are. So we know that both countries can benefit from trade if they each have a relatively lower opportunity cost. And the terms of trade is defined as the agreed upon conditions that would benefit both countries. So for instance, when we looked at Brazil and the United States the other day, trading 1 ton of wheat for 1.5 tons of sugar would be beneficial to both countries. So let's take an example here to kind of show you how we're going to come up with those terms of trade. So let's take the countries of Kenya and India, and they're going to be trading pineapples and radios. I know, maybe those aren't the major things you think of with those countries, but it doesn't matter in this particular example. So we're going to assume that Kenya can produce 30 pineapples and they can produce 10 radios, and India can produce 40 pineapples or 40 radios. So we can answer a few questions here. One, we can look at who has the absolute advantage in radios, what is the cost of one radio for India, the opportunity per unit opportunity cost for one pineapple in Kenya, who has a comparative advantage in pineapples, comparative advantage in radios, who should import pineapples, and does trading one radio for how many pineapples would benefit both countries. So to kind of come up with the answers for all that, all right, so once again, here's kind of all of those things, we need to first figure out what the per unit opportunity costs are. So the per unit opportunity cost for Kenya, so one pineapple costs a third of a radio. One radio costs 3 pineapples. One pineapple costs 1 radio costs 1 pineapple. Now, to kind of go through to figure out the terms of trade, what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at those two numbers, all right? Remember, that's the opportunity cost, all right? So question number 7 kind of coming all the way back, all right? Question number 7 coming all the way back over here is trading one radio for how many pineapples would benefit both countries? Well, we're looking right over here, so if we want to look at these two circles. So what we've got is we've got one radio for what pineapple would benefit either country. So we know that Kenya wants radios, and the terms of trade is anything between those numbers. So the answer to number 7 is one radio for any number in between here is going to benefit both countries. So that means that one radio for 2 pineapples, for instance, would benefit both countries at the end of the day. Well, it doesn't mean that it could be 1.5, it could be 2.5, it could be one radio for 2.99999 pineapples. Anything in between those two numbers is what the terms of trade are. Now, luckily enough for you, what's going to be coming up, we'll see most terms of trade questions are going to be multiple choice questions, which will make it really easy for you to figure that out. You won't have to guess at what the correct answer is. It'll just kind of give you a different kind of slew of options. So if we go all the way back over here, we can kind of answer the rest of these questions. So who has the absolute advantage in radios? Well, that's going to be India. They can produce more radios. What's the cost of one radio for India? Well, one radio for India is going to cost them 1 pineapple. The per unit opportunity cost for 1 pineapple for Kenya, all right, that's other goes over, it's going to be 1/3, all right, 1/3 radio. Comparative advantage in pineapples, comparative advantage in radios. Well, we're looking over here. Comparative advantage for pineapples, it's going to be the lower one. So Kenya has the comparative advantage for pineapples. They have the comparative advantage for radios. Remember, you're never going to have the comparative advantage in both of those things. All right, and then who should import pineapples? Well, they're going to make pineapples. They're going to make radios. So India should import pineapples. Now, we need to pause right here to get into the notes down, go right ahead. But remember, terms of trade is anything within those two ideas, okay? So trading one radio for 2 pineapples is going to benefit both. So if Kenya produces radios by themselves, they give 3 pineapples for each radio. They can trade 2 pineapples for each radio, they're better off. All right. If India produces radios by themselves, they can give up 1 pineapple for 1 radio, so that they can get 2 pineapples for 1 radio, they're better off. So countries trade at the lower opportunity cost than if they made it the product themselves. All right, so let's get into a couple practice questions. The video is going to pause itself and select the correct answer here. So the first question says, before specialization trade, the domestic opportunity cost of producing 1 ton of grain in alpha and in beta is which of the following? Okay, so you need to find out the per unit opportunity cost. Now, real quick on this, notice that you've got these numbers here. You can create your own chart for alpha and beta for steel and in grain. So the video is going to go ahead and pause, take a minute to figure out what the correct answer is, and we'll come back with the correct answer in just a second. All right, for this one, you should have selected B, 1 ton of steel for alpha and 2 tons of steel for beta. So let's take the same thing. So remember, you should have created a chart here. And let's look at this question. The theory of comparative advantage implies that alpha would find it advantageous too. So you're going to need to figure out the comparative advantage for each one. All right, video is going to go ahead and pause, figure out the correct answer. We're going to come back with that in just a second. All right, for this one, you should have found out that A, they should have exported grain and imported steel. We're going to stay with this particular graph for one more question over here. At what real exchange ratio, also referred to as terms of trade, between grain and steel would both alpha and beta find it mutually advantageous to specialize in trade? Remember, you're going to look at what's in between those comparative, or in between the per unit opportunity cost for this. We'll go ahead and pause the video and come back with the correct answer. All right, for this one, you should have found out that 1 gold is equal to 1 grain is equal to 1.5 steel is what you'll need for this one. All right, let's go ahead. Let's do one more practice question here. This practice question from 2012 says, the table below shows the production alternatives for country A and B for producing computers and cars with equal amounts of resources that are fully and efficiently employed. Which of the following is true according to the data in the table? All right, so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to be able to figure out the per unit opportunity cost for both of these, then go through the different A, B, C, D, and E possible answer choices. All right, now I know this can be confusing because you see the zeros here. You can almost ignore the zeros. All right, you can ignore the zeros. So it's like 15 and 45 for B, 12 and 24 for country A. All right, we'll come back in a second for just the correct answer. All right, for this question, number 26, you should have selected B. Country B has an absolute and comparative advantage in the production of computers. All right, on to our next practice question, question number 50. If 2 nations specialize according to law of comparative advantage and then trade with each other, which of the following would be true? Read through the possible answer choices. We'll come back with the correct answer in just a second. All right, for this one, you should have selected D. Each nation would increase its consumption possibilities, right? We can produce outside our production possibilities curve. Now, we have this practice exam, so we don't need to worry about this one. And we're not going to go ahead, we won't do this, but I'll throw it up here. This is good practice. If you're still not kind of understanding this, you probably want to work through these kind of practice questions to make sure that you're okay with absolute comparative advantage. What you should move on to now is the practice worksheets that you have for 1.4. It's really important that you're very, very comfortable identifying and figuring out absolute and comparative advantage, and then being able to identify terms of trade. Do reach out if you have any questions. I'm happy to help. And until next time, and as always, go Pack.